My mother said it in front of 23 people. I know the exact number because I had counted them when I walked in. It's a habit I have, the kind of thing a person does when they've spent enough years walking into rooms they don't quite feel welcome in. 23 people, my aunt's dining room in Spokane, a sheet cake on the counter that said Happy 65th, Donna, in pink frosting, and my mother looking me dead in the eye across the table. "You've always been the selfish one," she said. "You send a check when it's convenient and call it love. But you were never actually here when it counted." The room didn't go loud. It went the other kind of quiet, the kind where everyone is still breathing, but nobody wants to be the one caught looking. My sister Amber pressed her lips together. Her husband Craig studied the tablecloth. My Aunt Phyllis picked up her fork and set it back down. I didn't say anything. I reached into my purse, found my phone, opened the property management app I'd had on my home screen for 4 years, and canceled the auto pay on my parents' apartment. $48 a month saved me in fees. $1,400 a month was what my parents were about to start owing someone who wasn't me. I set the phone face down on my dinner plate, picked up my water glass, and took a long sip. My mother was still talking. I let her finish. "Before I tell you what happened next, I need to tell you something my family never knew. Because they assumed they did, and that assumption was the whole problem."
Hi.
Miss Zoe. I'm 31 years old. I work as a financial analyst for a logistics company out of Seattle. Fully remote since 2020. Before the pandemic, I used to drive 3 hours each way to visit my parents in Spokane on long weekends. After my dad's first cardiac event in the fall of that year, I started doing it every 3 weeks. I have the gas receipts if anyone wants to check. My father, Frank, spent 30 years as a warehouse supervisor before his heart started making decisions without him. He's 67 now, a man who fills a rip with his shoulders and then runs out of breath crossing it. He has heart failure and type 2 diabetes, which is a specific kind of exhausting that doesn't announce itself the same way every day. Some mornings, he's fine. Some mornings he calls me before 7 because he's dizzy and doesn't want to worry my mother. I always answer. My mother, Donna, is the kind of woman who manages the family's image the way other people manage their finances, carefully, constantly, and with a very specific idea of what the balance sheet should look like. She's sharp, and she's funny, and she kept this family running for 30 years on a teacher's aide salary and sheer force of will. She also has a long memory for other people's failures, and a short one for her own contributions to them. My sister Amber is 3 years older than me, lives 20 minutes from my parents, and has a gift for being visible. She brings dinner on Sundays. She posts photos. She shows up for the moments that photograph well, and she is genuinely warm when she does it. I want to be fair about that. Amber is not a bad person. She just never once asked where the money was coming from. Here is what she didn't know. Here is what none of them knew. When my father's health declined in 2021, my parents' landlord decided to sell the house they'd rented for 11 years. They had 60 days to find somewhere new. My father could barely manage stairs. My mother had never once navigated an apartment application in her life. She'd moved from her childhood home to college, to the first place she and my dad rented together in 1986, and she had never signed a lease that didn't have my father's name on it as the primary. They were 63 and 65 years old, and they had 60 days and no plan. I found the apartment in a week, 2-bedroom, single-floor unit in a complex off Division Street, with an elevator, a covered parking space, and a property manager named Ray who answered his phone on the second ring. I ran the credit check, my credit, not theirs, because my father's medical bills had done a number on their score that year. I signed the lease. I set up the auto pay through the tenant portal under my email address and my bank account number. $1,400 a month. I did not tell them it was in my name. I told them I had co-signed to help the application go through. That was close enough to true that I let it stand. My mother thanked me once, briefly, the day they moved in. She said it was a nice place. Then she called Amber to say Amber had been such a help with the boxes. I drove home to Seattle the same night. 3 hours. I cried for most of the first one, and then I turned on a podcast and kept going. That was November of 2021. For the next 4 years, $1,400 left my checking account on the first of every month. I set up a separate line item in my personal budget. Spokane. My financial planner asked about it once. I said it was a family situation. She nodded and didn't push. 48 months, $67,200. Under a line item most people never looked at twice. Nobody in that family ever once asked where the money came from to keep that apartment. To ask would have meant saying thank you. Saying thank you would have meant admitting I was doing something. And admitting I was doing something would have complicated the story they'd already agreed on. The one where Amber was the daughter who showed up, and I was the one who'd moved away and called it a career. So the story stood, and I let it. I need to tell you one thing so it doesn't just sound like a list of payments. It was a Tuesday in March, about 2 years in. My dad called me at 6:45 in the morning. His voice was the flat, careful kind he uses when he's trying not to frighten anyone. He said his ankles were swollen and he'd gained 4 pounds since the day before, and he felt like someone had wrapped a belt around his chest and was pulling. I knew what that meant. I'd been reading his symptom journals for 18 months by then. Yes, he kept one, and yes, I was the one who set it up, who bought the notebook, who showed him how to log his weight every morning on the little scale I'd ordered him for Christmas. I called his cardiologist's emergency line. I described the symptoms before the doctor could ask. They told him to go to the ER. I called Amber next and told her to take him. Amber hadn't noticed the ankle swelling. She'd been there the night before for Sunday dinner, moved to a Tuesday because of her kids' soccer schedules. She'd sat across from him for 2 hours and hadn't noticed his ankles. I wasn't there at all. I caught it from 300 miles away because I had been paying close enough attention for long enough that I could hear it in his voice at 6:45 on a Tuesday. He spent 2 nights in the hospital. They adjusted his diuretic. He came home fine. Amber posted a photo of herself holding his hand in the hospital bed. It got 112 likes. I know because I still have my phone. That was a Tuesday. There were a lot of them. My mother's 65th birthday party was on a Saturday in September. I drove down the night before, checked into a hotel on the north side of town. I'd stopped staying at their apartment 2 years back, after a visit where my mother referred to my job as whatever it is you do on the computer in front of company, and showed up at my Aunt Phyllis's house at noon with flowers and the specific bakery cookies my mother has loved since 1998. The afternoon was fine, mostly. My aunt has a warm house, and she keeps good wine, and there were cousins I genuinely like. My father sat in the good chair by the window and looked tired but happy. He called me over once to sit with him, and we talked for a while about nothing important, the way you do when you both know there are more important things, but the room isn't the right place for them. Then dinner, then the toast, then my mother, wine glass in hand, deciding to give a little speech about family. She talked about Amber first, how lucky she was to have a daughter who lived nearby, who brought dinner, who never made excuses. She talked about Craig, Amber's husband, who she said had been like a son to her. She talked about her grandkids. Then she looked at me, and something changed in her face. Not to cruelty, exactly, but to something that had been waiting for an audience. Zoe has always done things her way, she said. She left for Seattle the minute she could, and I don't hold that against her. She paused. and the pause was doing work. But I want to be honest on my birthday because I think honesty is a gift. You send money when it's convenient and you call it love. You always have. But you were never actually here when it counted. Amber was. That's just the truth. She raised her glass. To family, she said. The ones who stay. 23 people drank to that. I looked at her for a moment. Then I looked at my phone. I didn't call anyone. I opened the app. Ray's Property Management Company. Zoe's unit, autopay active. I tapped into settings. I tapped cancel. It asked me to confirm. I confirmed. I set the phone down. I finished my wine. I said goodbye to my aunt, to my cousins, to my father, who looked at me with the expression he gets when he knows something has happened, but doesn't know what. I hugged him a little longer than usual. I drove back to my hotel. I ordered room service. I sat by the window and looked at the lights along Division Street and thought about how the apartment was about 3 miles from where I was sitting, and how my name was still on the door in the tenant portal, and how that was going to matter very soon. My mother sent me a text at 10:15. It said, "I hope you know I meant that with love." I read it twice. I put the phone face down on the nightstand. There was nothing in that message that surprised me, and somehow that was the saddest thing of all. The property management company sent a payment failure notice on the 3rd of the month. Standard procedure. Ray had told me when I set up the account that they send automated alerts after 48 hours of failed autopay. The notice goes to the email on file and is also posted as a physical letter to the unit address. I know exactly when my mother found it because she called me at 8:19 in the morning, and her voice had the high, controlled pitch of someone trying not to sound panicked. "There's a letter," she said, "from the building management. It says the rent wasn't paid." "I know," I said. A pause. "What do you mean you know?" "I canceled the autopay," I said, "a few days ago." "Why would you do that?" Her voice was still controlled. She was waiting for me to tell her it was a mistake. A technical thing. Something I'd fix. "I think it's time for whoever is actually responsible for that apartment to take over the payment," I said. "I'll email you Ray's contact information." Another pause, longer this time. "Zoe, I don't understand what you're saying." "I know," I said. And I meant it kindly. She really didn't understand. That was the whole problem. "Ray can walk you through the account. The lease is in my name. You'll need to arrange a transfer or a new lease. He's very easy to work with. He answers on the second ring." I heard her breath change on the line. "The lease is in your..." She stopped, started again. "You've been paying the rent." "For 4 years," I said. "Yes." I heard her put her hand over the phone. I heard her say something I couldn't make out, and I heard my father's voice in the background, the low rumble of a question. "I'll email you Ray's number today," I said. "He knows the situation. Take care, Mom." I hung up. Here is what I know about the next 72 hours, partly from Ray, who called me out of professional courtesy because he is genuinely a decent person, and partly from my cousin Alicia, who was at my Aunt Phyllis's house when the calls started coming in. My mother called Amber first. She told her about the letter. Amber said she would handle it and called the property management office. Ray asked for the account number. Amber didn't have it. Ray asked for the name on the lease. Amber gave my parents' names. Ray told her the lease was under a different name. He asked if she wanted him to say the name or if she already knew it. Amber said she didn't know it. There was a silence on that call. My cousin told me later that lasted long enough to be uncomfortable. Amber called my mother back, then she called me. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was 7 minutes long, and I will summarize it. She was upset. She felt blindsided. She didn't understand why I would do something like this without telling anyone, and she needed me to call her back immediately so we could fix this together. That phrase, Fix This Together is the one I keep coming back to. 4 years of payments, and she was asking me to fix it together, as though we had been in it together all along, and I had simply made an unilateral decision. My father called Ray himself that afternoon. He's the kind of man who, when something needs doing, does it himself if he can. Ray told him, gently but plainly, that the account had been in my name since November of 2021, that $67,000 in payments had come from my bank account, and that the autopay had been canceled earlier that week. My father asked Ray to repeat the amount. Ray repeated it. My father said, "She never told us." Ray said, "No, sir, she didn't." I know this because Ray told me when he called. His voice was careful and professional, and he said, "I just want you to know that your father seemed like he needed a minute after that call." He paused. He asked me if there was a record of all the payments. I told him yes. He asked if he could have a copy. I told Ray to send it. My mother left me a voicemail 3 days after the birthday party. I have it saved. I have listened to it enough times that I can tell you exactly where her breath catches. She started formal. "Zoe, this is your mother. I think we need to talk." Then something shifted. Her voice lost its shape a little, the way voices do when the prepared words run out. "Didn't know," she said. "About the apartment. About any of it, I didn't know." A pause. Amber doesn't know how any of this works. She didn't know who the landlord was. She didn't. Another pause longer. I told everyone Amber handled things. I believed it. I don't know what I believed. I don't know how I didn't ask. She was quiet for a moment, and I could hear the clock on her kitchen wall, the one she's had since I was 9, ticking behind her words. "You were never the selfish one," she said finally, very quietly, like she was setting something down that had been heavy for a long time. I don't know why I said that. I think I do know why, and I don't want to say it on a voicemail. Her voice cracked once, recovered. "Call me when you're ready, if you're ever ready. I'll understand if you're not." She hung up. I sat with that voicemail for a long time, not because it healed anything. It didn't, not the way I once thought hearing the truth would. But because I had spent 4 years trying to earn exactly that admission, and now that I had it, what I mostly felt was tired. A clean kind of tired, like a weight had been set down in a room I was finally allowed to leave. The truth moved through the family the way these things always do, sideways, through the people who weren't directly involved. My cousin Alicia texted me first, then 2 aunts, then a family group chat message from Phyllis that said simply, "I had no idea. I'm so sorry, Zoe." Amber messaged me too a week after the birthday party when the group chat had quieted and she'd had time to think. It was a long message, and it was honest in a way I appreciated even though it arrived too late to change anything. She said she had known on some level that things got handled and that she hadn't asked how. She said she'd told herself I was contributing money in the background the way people do. And she hadn't asked because asking felt like opening something she didn't want to look at. "I got to be the good one," she wrote, "and I let that happen. I'm sorry." I read it, standing in my kitchen in Seattle, morning light coming in off the water, coffee going cold on the counter. I read it twice. I noticed that I didn't cry. I noticed that the apology landed somewhere that had already started to close on its own. I wrote back, "I know, thank you for saying it." That was all. My father called me the following Sunday. Not about the apartment. He'd worked out the lease situation with Ray directly. There were forms, a new agreement, new bank information. He was paying it himself now, and I was told he had looked at his monthly budget for the first time in 4 years and rearranged it without complaint. He called because he wanted to talk to me. We were on the phone for almost an hour, which is something we had not done since I was in college. He talked about, when I was little, about the things he remembered about me that had nothing to do with what I could fix or arrange. He told me he remembered a time I was 8 years old, and I had reorganized his toolbox without being asked, because I noticed he could never find the right wrench. He said he'd told that story at work for years after. He said he'd told it like it was funny. He was only now understanding that it wasn't. "You've been taking care of things since you were 8, he said, and I never once stopped to wonder what that cost you." I didn't say anything for a moment. "You don't have to fix this either, Dad," I said. "This isn't something to fix, it's just something we both needed to understand." He said okay. He said he'd try. That wasn't a resolution, some things aren't, but it was honest, and honest was the thing I had been starving for long enough that I wasn't going to refuse it, just because it came late. Here is the part I need to say out loud, because it is the part that finally set me free. I did not stay silent for 4 years because I was afraid. I stayed silent because I believed, somewhere beneath all the budgets and the auto pay and the drives across the mountains, that if I kept the lights on long enough, my mother would eventually look up and see me doing it. That she would say, without anyone prompting her, "I see what you carry. I see you." I was not keeping that apartment running out of obligation. I was doing it to buy back the version of my mother who used to tell people her younger daughter was going to do something extraordinary. The one who had been proud of me once before I moved away, before I became the absence she measured Amber against. You cannot buy that back. You can only pay and mistake the invoice for love. Understanding that didn't make me angry. It made me calm in a way I hadn't felt in years, because if I had been paying for something that was never for sale, then I could stop. And stopping wasn't abandonment. It was the first honest thing I had done in a long time. I set my parents up with a housing assistance coordinator through a nonprofit that serves older adults in Spokane County. She is a woman in her 50s named Greta, who has worked in elder housing for 20 years, and who takes her job seriously in the way that people do when they actually care about it. She helped my parents apply for a state rental assistance supplement they qualified for and had never known about. She got their monthly payment down by $300. She is their coordinator now, and she is very good at it. The new lease has my parents' names on it, their email address, their bank account. I looked at the updated account in the portal one last time, my name removed, the new information in its place, and I sat down at my kitchen table and just breathed for a minute. It felt strange. It felt like the first day after a long trip when you realize you don't have anywhere to be. I started spending on myself. The money that had been leaving my account every first of the month, I put toward things I had been putting off. A real desk for my home office. A trip to see a college friend in Boston. 3 months of cooking classes I'd had bookmarked since 2019. Small things. Things that had no return on investment, except that they were mine. I still visit Spokane. Not every 3 weeks, that was never sustainable, and I had only been doing it to prove something unprovable. But I go. I sit with my father in the good chair by the window. We've started watching a documentary series together on Sunday evenings, just talking about it over the phone, episode to episode. It is an uncomplicated kind of company, and I am learning to let it be enough without needing it to be more. My mother and I are in progress. That's the honest word for it. She said what she needed to say on that voicemail. I heard it. We are not the same as we were, and I don't think we will be. But we are something. I'll take something over the performance we were both putting on before. Amber and I had one real conversation, just the two of us, about 3 months after the birthday party. We met halfway, in Ellensburg, at a diner off the highway. We talked for 2 hours. We ordered pie we didn't finish. We said the things that had needed saying since we were teenagers and had never had a container big enough to hold them. I don't know what we are now, but I think we are at least trying to be honest, which is more than most siblings manage. My mother said, I was selfish for leaving. She was wrong about the leaving, but she wasn't entirely wrong about the silence. I chose to stay quiet. Because I thought silence was strength. I have since learned that silence in service of someone else's comfort is just another way of disappearing. I made myself disappear for 4 years. I showed up as a bank account, and a phone that answered before the second ring, and a set of hands that handled things no one ever thought to ask about. And I told myself that was love. It wasn't love. It was a performance I was giving to an audience that hadn't bought a ticket. I was putting on a show for an empty theater and calling the silence applause. My mother told me to send a check when I couldn't show up. For 4 years, I did exactly that. And the check was for $1,400 a month, and it came from my account, and it had my name on it. She just never thought to look. She knows now. They all know now, and I don't need any of them to thank me, or to apologize the right way, or to say the exact combination of words that would make 4 years of quiet payments feel worthwhile. That accounting is closed. The autopay is canceled, and so is the version of me who set it up. I'm 31 years old, I live in Seattle, I work from a real desk now, the one I finally bought for myself, by the window that looks out over the water. On Sunday evenings, I call my dad, and we talked about whatever episode we just watched, and sometimes he says something that surprises me, and sometimes I say something that surprises him, and we are learning each other again like people who are meeting for the first time and have decided it's worth the effort. My mother called it selfish when I left. She called it selfish when I didn't show up the way Amber showed up. She called it selfish when I built a life far enough away that she couldn't measure it by what it did for her. I used to think I had to prove otherwise. I don't anymore. The check is gone, and so is the need to be understood by people who preferred not to look. I know what I gave, I know what it cost, and I know I stopped on my own terms, from a kitchen in Seattle, with my coffee going cold and my hands finally still.